Tonight, Jazz Library investigates the work of one of the most distinctive and individual trumpeters in jazz, Shorty Rogers. This is the band with whom he came to Britain in 1991, the Lighthouse All-Stars. Shorty Rogers' composition, Casa Duluth, played by the band he co-led with Bud Shank, the Lighthouse All-Stars, and Shorty himself was the flugelhorn soloist. During that band's tour of the UK, they made a broadcast for BBC Radio 3, which was when I first had the chance to talk to Shorty, an acquaintance we renewed later that year when he led a West Coast jazz evening at the Royal Albert Hall. The day after the Albert Hall concert, we met at the Bull's Head in Barnes, where, with thanks to the landlord, then and now, Dan Fleming, we recorded an interview about Shorty's life, which became the series Cool and Crazy in 1992. Tonight, I've delved back into that interview to hear how Shorty, who sadly died in 1994, guided me through his recorded work. His first discs were made with Red Norvo, and soon afterwards he joined Woody Herman, going on then to play with Stan Kenton. But in 1951, he started to record under his own name.
I was still with Kenton at the time, and Gene Norman, a disc jockey in the Los Angeles area, who was very, very popular at that time. He used to come to hear Woody's band. When I was with the band, I became friends with him. And he called me up, said, let's do an album. But that was the first one. And Gene Norman produced it himself, and all of a sudden it's done. He's got it. I think he had to shop it around, and Capitol bought it. So I admire him for taking a chance on this.
Popo from Shorty's debut under his own name, the Modern Sounds album, originally produced by Gene Norman and issued by Capitol. It's still available as half of a Japanese AMI issue under that original title of Modern Sounds, the rest of the disc being made up of tracks by Jerry Mulligan. But what we've just heard comes from the 2-CD set West Coast Sounds 1950-56, a comprehensive collection of Shorty's recordings on the Fresh Sound label in their Jazz City series. The lineup was Shorty Rogers, trumpet, John Grass, French horn, Gene England, tuba, Art Pepper, alto, Jimmy Jufrey, baritone, Hampton Hawes piano, Don Bagley bass, and Shelley Mann drums, and it was recorded in Hollywood on the 1st of July 1951. Almost the same lineup got together again in January 53 for Shorty's second album under his own name, called just Shorty Rogers and the Giants. This time Milt Bernhardt was added on trombone and Joe Mondragon came in on bass. The new disc was issued by RCA, and there'll be more about that relationship in a minute. But first, another chance to hear some glorious piano playing from Hamp Hawes on the Giants album in Diablos Dance. Diablos Dance by Shorty Rogers and his Giants, available on the West Coast Sounds album from Fresh Sound, and also in a 2-CD set from Giant Steps Records that covers a lot of Shorty's early days, with the likes of Woody Herman, Red Norvo and Stan Kenton. At one time, most of this material was available from RCA in the Bluebird series on the album Short Stops, but now most of Shorty's work is out on other labels. And that's also true of his seminal big band disc from later in the same year as the piece we've just heard, the year 1953, and the seminal album Cool and Crazy.
Well, Jack Lewis went to RCA, and, I told them they should record Shorty Rogers, and they said, well, gee, I don't know about that, but we have a title for an album that we'd love to get the album made, but we don't know who to do it with. He says, what's the title? They said, it's Cool and Crazy, but we don't know who to do it with. And Jack spoke on my behalf, and it wound up being me.
And they did lots of publicity, those pictures of you with weird helmets and other things. Was that publicity just hype for the album?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't walk around with a space helmet on anymore.
Infinity Promenade by Shorty Rogers and his orchestra featuring the Giants in the spring of 1953. It's a lineup that was built around his small band, and it consisted of Shorty, Conrad Gotzo, Maynard Ferguson, Tom Reeves and John Howell on trumpets, Milt Bernhardt, Harry Betts and John Halliburton trombone, John Grass French horn, Gene England tuba, Art Pepper, Bud Shank, Jimmy Jeffrey, Bob Cooper on reeds, with Marty Paich piano, Curtis Counts bass and Shelley Mann drums. You can find it on both the Giant Steps 2-CD set and also the Fresh Sound double album I've mentioned. I should say that the production values of the Fresh Sound CDs are excellent, with reproductions of the original sleeves in colour and a very helpful set of notes. However, the big band tracks are actually in a different order on the CD from the titles given on the label, so beware of that. And speaking of titles, the names of these tracks like Bo Jibu, Chiquito Loco and the rest have a somewhat exotic feel about them.
We have fun with the titles, yeah. Sweetheart of Sigmund Freud, Milt Bernhard came up with that title, and Shelley would contribute titles. In the Cool and Crazy album, Tale of an African Lobster was Shelley's title. I don't know how it came about, but it just became a fun thing to, have the title say something more than I'm a tune.
The unusually titled Tale of an African Lobster from the double CD Sweetheart of Sigmund Freud on the Giant Steps label, and originally part of Shorty Rogers' 1953 album Cool and Crazy. By this time, Shorty had left the Stan Kenton Band, though he was still supplying it with arrangements, and as well as fronting his own groups in the studio, he was playing at an oceanside club just outside Los Angeles at Hermosa Beach, the Lighthouse, where former Kenton bassist Howard Rumsey led the house band.
As the Lighthouse started going under Howard's guidance, it turned into the place in Los Angeles where people could come to hear jazz, and it was a long way from Los Angeles. Before they had a freeway, motorway to get down there, it took at least an hour to drive down there. And the place is always packed full of people. A lot of people from the film community would drive down there, like, I heard there's some jazz, let's go down and catch it, which is the exact reason that I wound up working in the film studios, and all of us. People came down to hear us there and liked what they heard and would invite us to work on some film project. Howard had a lot to do with that. and a chance for us, myself, and all of us that have been on the road for years and years to finally come home to Los Angeles, where we were living at that time, and unpack the suitcases and put them away and be able to, unbelievable as it sounds now and at that time, have a job playing jazz, earning a living, full-time job playing jazz.
Was it every night of the week?
It was 5 nights, but Sunday was 2 in the afternoon till 2 at night, so Sunday was like working an extra week or something. We look back, all of us that have done it, and say, how did we do that? And the answer is usually youth.
Howard Rumsey Lighthouse All-Stars in July 1952, with Shorty Rogers on trumpet, plus Milt Bernhardt trombone, Bob Cooper and Jimmy Jeffrey on reeds, Frank Patchen piano, Howard Rumsey bass and Shelley Mann on drums. That was recorded on the 22nd of July 1952, and it's one of a trio of similar tracks included on the Giant Steps label's collection of Rogers material, The Sweetheart of Sigmund Freud. All 3 of those tracks are quite tightly arranged, and the same goes for quite a lot of the pieces on the various LPs that originally came out on Contemporary, some of which are now collected into an anthology called West Coast Jazz Live, the Lighthouse Concerts, on the Saga label. So how had the music come to have this level of arranging in what was, after all, a nightclub house band?
Jimmy Jeffrey and I spent, I think, the longest time of my stay there together, and we were both studying composition from the same teacher at that time. And,
who was that?
Dr. Wesley LaViolette. Jimmy and I, we were neighbors at that time, and instead of taking an hour lesson each, we'd go together and share a 2-hour lesson. We'd come to work, and he'd bring in 2 arrangements. I'd bring in 1. Next night I'd bring in 2, he'd bring in 1. But they were first chorus and last chorus, nothing that complicated, but there was an influx of new material coming in that was like an avalanche. It never quit.
Just like Duke and Billy Strayhorn writing for the band all the time. You were doing the same thing.
Yeah, because, we were just studying and working with the pencil and paper where it was just a fun thing. Write something, and hey, we can go to work tonight, we're going to hear it, we're going to play it right away. We don't have to wait 4 years,
And were those lessons the kind of basis of your experiments with 12 tones and modal writing?
In a way, but the basis of our studying was a study of counterpoint. I think Jimmy utilized it more than me, but it was basically the study of counterpoint, Bach, Beethoven, the old masters, Mozart, and some of the things had kind of a Baroque flavor, which we would occasionally touch on to also, but once that part ended, it just went into a lot of blowing. So it had the both ingredients were there.
Jimmy Jufrey's septet and his composition Nutty Pine, a piece written during his studies with Dr. Wesley La Violette, showing that plenty of the counterpoint he'd been working on had found its way into his jazz writing. The band was Jimmy Jufrey on clarinet and tenor, Jack Sheldon, trumpet, Shorty Rogers on flugel, Bob Enevoldson on trombone, Bud Shank, alto, Ralph Pena, bass, and Shally Mann, drums, recorded on the 15th of April, 1954, and included in Jimmy Jufrey's complete Capitol recordings, 54 to 55, on the Fresh Sound label. It's one of 4 such tracks, the rest featuring just a quintet with Jack Sheldon, rather than Shorty, in the trumpet chair. But the following year, Jimmy Jufrey and Shorty were sharing frontline duties in Shorty's own band at a smart Hollywood nightclub, which is where their most famous tune, Martians Go Home, originated.
The quintet of the Giants were playing at a club in Hollywood named Zardy's, and at that time we'd go into a club and we'd stay a year. It wouldn't be, for 1 week or 10 days. We'd stay for a very long time, so we're coming there, it's like the 8th month of the engagement, and by this time, the bartender, all the waitresses, the doorman, everyone's like a family situation. So in the men's room, on the wall, someone had written, "Martians go home." Someone told the girls about it, and it became just a funny thing. People would walk up to each other that worked there, and they'd say, "Martians go home," and everyone would laugh. It was like a stone rolling downhill, getting larger and larger. So to try to outdo everyone, we got on the bandstand one night. It was the last set. So I said, "Everyone listen, we have a new original we're going to play now for the first time. It's entitled Martians Go Home." And the bartender fell down laughing, and all the people working there and the audience, say, "What are all these crazy people laughing at?" I turned around and said, "Okay, rhythm section, play blues in F." I count them off, and they're playing, and while they're playing, I sing a little riff to Jimmy Jufrey. And we come in, and it's the most simple, repetitive little melody. And we had our little joke. The bartender had a laugh, and we thought that's the end of it. So we come to work the next night. Before we get on the bandstand, people are all coming up and say, "Play that Martians Go Home." And it just wanted to come to life or something, or to live longer. People kept hearing about it, and it just became something associated with us, and it's very much of that Kansas City 7 Count Basie-ish kind of soft rhythm thing too. But we got requests later, from record producers, "We're going to do an album, get another Martian kind of tune in there." So there's a whole bunch of them. I don't even remember all of the titles. Every once in a while I pick up a tape or something, and there's another one that I forgot about.
The original and genuine Martians Go Home, now available on the first volume of a 3-CD set of Shorty's Giants, the Complete Quintet Sessions 1954-56 on the Fresh Sound label. And if you have a taste for these Martian tunes, then you'll be pleased to hear that the set also contains Martians Come Back, March of the Martians and Martians Stay Home. To my mind, the ingredient that made Martians Go Home such a long-lasting success was the inspirational clarinet of Jimmy Jufrey.
I'll just start out by saying, it's a sound I love so much, and Jimmy Jufrey is one of my very closest friends and someone I admire so much, and I feel I've learned an awful lot from this great musician, and it's impossible for me to thank him. He's just a great guy. But one interesting thing, I feel Jimmy would say the same thing, but that different clarinet sound of his, it dovetails into Lester Young and the Kansas City Seven when Lester Young was playing clarinet, but that sound was part of Jimmy's heritage, and he took that and went on further and put more of himself into it, and it emerged as his sound, and he's the only one that has it, and it's just wonderful.
So when you do an arrangement, like, for example, that Blues in the Night arrangement, presumably you figured that with Jimmy's sound in mind.
I was hoping he would do that, and my hopes were realized, yeah.
Blues in the Night, and that comes from a Shorty Rogers Bluebird CD called simply Swings. Its title drawn from the earlier LP, Chances Are It Swings. That's currently unavailable, but certainly worth seeking out second-hand through the trade for this and other marvellous arrangements by Shorty from the time he was just beginning a 20-year layoff from playing in public to devote himself to writing and arranging. Before that, though, Shorty'd made a number of big band discs with another trumpeter who'd made his name in the 1930s Count Basie band.
Sweets Edison is my hero. See, when I first started, I got a trumpet for my bar mitzvah when I was 13 years old. Father said, what do you want? Trumpet. Got me one in a pawn shop for $15. But I hadn't taken any lessons. I played in a drum and bugle course. I could blow into the instrument and make a sound, but the valves and all that, I just knew nothing about. So only way I could play anything was phonetically learning it, one note at a time, press this valve, press that valve. But one of the very first things, may have been the first that I learned to play, was Harry Edison's solo on Count Basie's record, Sent for You Yesterday, Here You Come Today. And I can still play it. I mean, I love it, but I never dreamt that this guy who's such a hero to me would be on the same studio with me or something. I don't want to use the word worship, but as close as I could come to that for a human being. As a person and as a player, and he's up in his years, he sounds better than ever. I'm saying, here's my hero. He's in the trumpet section here. I enjoyed having him do some soloing and naming something after him and all that. I have a picture of the two of us hugging each other. It's one of my most prized possessions.
At Home with Sweets, the great Basie trumpeter guesting with Shorty Rogers Big Band in 1956, and that's included on the 2-CD Fresh Sound album of Shorty's Orchestra and Giants sides from 1954 to 6. As I said, Shorty disappeared from the playing arena from the start of the 60s until the 80s, when he made a triumphant return to the stage for the last 12 years of his life. He died exactly 13 years ago this week in 1994. I'll just recap over my main recommended albums tonight. First, The Sweetheart of Sigmund Freud, a 2-CD set on Giant Steps, is a good overview of Shorty's early days, up to and including the first Giants and Big Bands recordings. The 2-CD set we've just heard, Shorty and his orchestra featuring the Giants, is on Fresh Sound, as is the 3-CD set of the Shorty Rogers Quintet, 1954 to 6. The same label now has the complete Jimmy Jufrey Capitol recordings from the mid-50s. And Shorty Rogers Swings was on Bluebird, but is currently unavailable. Our final disc is America the Beautiful, the one with which I started tonight, still available from Candid, the reunion version of the Lighthouse All-Stars, co-led by Shorty and Bud Shank. This is Fun by Shorty Rogers, Bud Shank and the Lighthouse All-Stars from the 1991 album America the Beautiful. Full details of this and all tonight's music are on the website. That's www.bbc.co.uk/radio3/jazzlibrary. And do contact me via the link there if you think I've overlooked any of Shorty's essential recordings. That'll be useful for the next feedback show, which is being recorded in a few days' time at the London Jazz Festival on Sunday, the 18th of November. But for now, from me, Alan Shipton, good night.
That was Fun, and it was performed by Shorty Rogers, Bud Shank and the Lighthouse All-Stars, concluding tonight's Jazz Library.